fascinating, right? This was truly fascinating. My super Democrat neighbor popped round on Sabbath. Sabbath is always a good time to catch up with people, right? And we were chatting. We can't talk about politics because she goes, start screaming incoherently, right? But she did say that she stopped watching MSNBC. She's just like, it's not interesting, and I'm just not enjoying it. The reason you're not enjoying it is because you've got to do all this like mental gymnastics. You know they're full of crap. It's, you know, basically you know they're full of crap, and you're like being in a cult, and you can just see the outside, and you're scared of seeing the outside. So that was that and it's been the last few months that she hasn't been watching it, and she's much happier for it, right? She's so much happier because they're not messing with her freaking brain, right? I started talking to her about The Sound of Freedom, and I'd say, oh, yeah, you probably heard all this bad stuff about it. No, she hadn't. Because she got off her absolute... that media is meant to destroy you. It's meant to make you absolutely miserable. And, you know, and it does. Anyway, so let's have a look. So again, I think you see that as another sign of the end of the day. So let's have a look, see what the Trumps has been saying. Doink.
It's free speech. This means that we cannot ever criticize or look after election. Once that happens, you have tyranny. We can't look at elections. We cannot.
We have tyranny now, right? Look, there's a reason why they don't want you to look at the election. There's a reason why, because if you drill down 1 inch, like just 1 inch, it falls apart. I think this thing about him, he was indicted because they say he knew he was lying, right? I think he should be allowed to present his evidence in open court, which he's never been able to do, right? Honestly, I think the Supreme Court should have him say, present your evidence to us and the American people, and just lay everything out there, right? And you know, if there's nothing there, why would anybody be against it? It's because they know there's something there, and they're terrified of having to admit it. There was a great clip. Oh, where was this? With Vivek Ramaswamy, Ramaswamy, I should say. No, now I've got his name wrong. Where was it? Vivek Ramaswamy. Where was this? Hang on. Let me do a search. Where he's talking to this like super liberal guy. So it's half hour long, but I will find the we'll find the right bit, right? It's about a minute long. Where essentially asked him like, look, you don't think there's any problems with the election, do you? You're not crazy like that. And man, I tell you, he's so much better a candidate than Trump. And I love Trump, right? Don't get me wrong. I want Trump to be the candidate. He is so much better a candidate for the reasons he says. And he's a very smart guy. His reason for this, one of his reasons was, look, about a third of the world goes insane when you say that, when they see Donald Trump, they go nuts, right? They see him and their programming's a bit different because it's because he's brown, and it's like it's so racist. That's all the difference.
I'd criticize. Well, Hillary Clinton criticized, and all of these. Stacey Abrams still hasn't conceded. I mean, all of these people criticize. I mean, you would have half of Congress right now in jail. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, but like expecting there to be one standard is that's one thing that blew my mind about my local synagogue, right? It was like I criticized the rabbi very accurately, right? I didn't even criticize him. I was very polite. I just said, I don't see how this is right. I don't know. And I asked him to explain. He had a meltdown beyond I think he became mentally ill. Actually, I really do. I really, really do. Because that's when he started just like completely violating Jewish law, right? Very, very publicly. And all the supporters did that as well. And I caught them doing it like 20 times over. And it's as if it didn't happen, right? And I was like, look, it's one thing to watch, the secular world, like a secular government have no standard. But like this is, we believe it's the word of God, right? If you either have, right now you have a double standard because they did all this stuff very publicly. all right, and there's violations of Jewish law, very, 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 very publicly, right? And it's like they were held to no standard. It wasn't like they were held to the same standard they held me. They were held to no standard whatsoever. And what made me mentally ill is they were like, yeah, we're totally fine with that. I'm like, okay. It's fine. It's like, and it's weird. I see them all go to synagogue still, right? And they all like study and they pray. And I'm like, it's like saying, I'm really into soccer, but I don't like the bit where they kick the ball. I'm like, well, you don't like soccer then. Anyway, don't expect there to be one standard. If I can't get one standard in the local politics of my sodding synagogue, right? I mean, it's like, literally, there was nobody that gave a damn about Jewish law, including the rabbi of the town, right? He was like, because of politics. It's all just politics. It's ridiculous.
He is criticizing the election. And let me tell you, there's a lot to criticize, which you'll find out over the coming weeks. Isn't it terrible that a political opponent, though, can haphazardly charge you with a fake crime in the middle of your campaign in order to interfere with your time, your money, your message, and there is nothing you can do in theory to stop this travesty of justice? Isn't that a shame?
More than a shame, mate. Never used to happen. Never used to need to happen, right? Never used to need to happen. One second, let's have a look another bit. Here's the Vivek section, which is brilliant. Yeah. One second. Is this? It must be at the beginning.
Joe Biden is involved in some kind of bribery fraud scheme, or like, what about it?
So I'm not.
Oh, it's right at the beginning. Awesome. So this guy's super like left-wing Biden.
The election. Or unfortunately is often my first question when we speak to candidates right now. It's just sort of like a sanity check, which I think you will pass, honestly.
Let's hope.
Is there any way to interpret that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election, or did he lose the 2020 election?
So he is not expecting the answer he's going to get.
The way you're framing the question, you're asking me a very specific question. Is there any way? Here's one important unexplored strand. Okay. The Hunter Biden laptop story and its systematic suppression. I'm a data-driven guy.
Really?
I'm a data-driven guy, and I think you probably are too, based on
absolutely
what little I know.
Well, I like to think of myself as a data-driven guy.
So look at the polling data on the aftermath and before and after. There are more than enough people. It's not even by a super small margin that say they would have changed their vote had they been exposed to that information before that election. The fact is that was systematically suppressed in what was probably the single greatest form of election interference in American history. And there was a lot of discussion. If I may just finish, just to get the full freight of my view here.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion about the legitimacy of the 2016 election on the back of Russian election interference that actually, it turns out, was actually much smaller scale than surmised. But on the day of Trump's inauguration, there was a lot of discussion. Hillary Clinton called the election result illegitimate and said that it was partly the product of Russian election interference.
I don't know what it is about him saying it, not that people don't go insane. But it's weird, they don't. Like, it's a strange. I think it's because his skin is brown. I really do. I mean, could that be the only thing?
Whatever that was, that pales in comparison,
really
to the effect of the systematic suppression on domestic soil of a story that 2 years later, every news outlet in this country has absolutely admitted was indeed true when it was systematically suppressed at the time. So
it gets better. Okay, it gets better.
You ask the question, is there any basis? There's your basis.
And it is, do you have an opinion as to, is it the explicit pictures of Hunter that would have in some way changed?
No, it's not that. Well, there is that. That didn't help. No, it's more the smoking gun evidence that they were receiving millions of dollars in bribes from Ukraine and everywhere else in the world. He was insanely compromised. Could be that, right? Again, the smoking gun evidence.
Changed people's minds, or the as of yet unproven claims that Joe Biden is involved in?
I mean, really? I mean, more proven than the Russian claims, but I mean, like, he received the money. There's that. There's the bank records.
Some kind of bribery fraud scheme or
some kind of, you mean the actual bribery fraud scheme.
Like, what about it?
So I'm not speaking for the survey respondents, but I can tell you what speaks to me.
Yeah.
Actually. Because I wouldn't have changed my vote. I voted for Trump, right? So I wasn't one of the survey respondents who said I would have changed my vote because...
maybe it's just he sounds like he's intelligent, right? I don't know. What is it that they don't like Trump? I think Trump triggers them because he's like, he doesn't sound smart. He doesn't sound educated. I think Trump's very smart. I think this guy sounds like he's Harvard, Harvard grad. So, he is.
Good.
So here's what does speak to me, and I think it's relevant. Let's just take this outside the scope of political partisanship. The Burisma payments to Hunter Biden are a deep problem. $5 million paid by a Ukrainian company, privately owned by somebody who at the time was sitting on the National Security Council in Ukraine. Relevant now because it did result in an impeachment of a U.S. president that was Trump, who called for further investigation of that in Ukraine. But that wasn't the only geopolitical consequence of it. I think it has deep-seated implications even now for, say what many people on Russia's side of this say. Well, you have a U.S. president whose son was dealing, when that person was vice president, with actually the Ukrainian government indirectly, accepting what in any other context we would call bribes. So much so that President Obama's staff actually raised this with Biden, only to be shouted down by it. This is a bipartisan concern.
Yeah, this is crazy.
That's a real...
I had to cut that segment off there, which is a shame because there's a little bit more that I wanted to go over, which is I'm going to present right here, right now. I had to cut it off there because I ended up, I had somebody coming on my live stream and they turned out to be a completely crazy person, like a genuinely crazy person. Go look at the live stream if you want to see it. It's about half an hour in. And they said there was somebody else that come. It was nuts. It was completely nuts. And as I said, it was a shame because this was really interesting content. Anyway, so I cut him off before he made, I think, a very good point. This was towards the end of the interview. In the video notes, by the way, is the link to the full half-hour interview, and it's worth watching. Listen, I always suggest looking at things in context because don't trust anybody's spin on anything, anybody's take on anything, myself included, right? And it's not that I'm trying to mislead you. It's like I have my point of view, right? I have my my worldview, and I'm reasonably passionate about that. But yeah, make up your own mind. But anyway, he made a really, I think, stunningly good point at the end, which again, I think these people heard, which blows my mind completely. That, like, normally when you have a conversation with somebody, I don't want to say left, right, because it's not really left, right? Because left-wing people are generally speaking quite normal, right? People who vote Democrat normally aren't into, I don't know, all the weirdness that comes along with being a Democrat nowadays. It's like, the weird sex and gender theory in schools and race theory, just all the general weirdness, right? Democrats, generally speaking, are normal people, which I think this guy is tapping into. But to believe the things they believe, they can't really interact with anybody who has a different point of view for them. But what they do it as a surrogate for that is they have people state what they believe is the opposing argument very badly, right? Very badly, so they can tear it down. It's called straw manning, right? Which Vivek addresses, right? Like it does address in this in the closing. And again, somewhat brilliant. So we're gonna look at that clip now. And look, I just want to say, I am big in the bag for Trump, right? Look, I like Trump a lot. I think he did good by the Jews, right? Which is one of my main things. I'm very Jewy, right? I'm very, very Jewish. I'm crazily religious. Like, I actually believe the stuff the Old Testament says, which I found out in recent years puts me in a teeny tiny demographic, like just a microscopically small part of the Venn diagram, but and also labels me as being crazy, quite rightly so, right? So I think Trump's going to be the next president, if assuming that there is one, because I think that's the will of God, and I understand that's bonkers, right? It's one thing to have a bonkers point of view. It's another thing not to understand. It's bonkers. But I understand that's bonkers, right? So that's my crazy worldview. I don't see any naturalistic way that he gets on the ballot, Trump, right? I really don't, all right? I really don't. It's I think it's going to need an open miracle for that to happen. Look, you're allied against, the gears of the state, right? I mean, they're going to find some reason to put you in jail forever, and if not, they're going to kill you. One of the two, right? I don't see any naturalistic way it can really go down. But that being the case, I believe all of Trump's support will transfer to this bloke, Vivek. And he will destroy, he would just destroy whoever they put in his path. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and I will be, I'll be happy to vote for him. I'd be bummed that I wouldn't be voting for Trump. I'm not voting for anyone. I'm English. I don't have a horse in the race. My wife and kids would vote, but I would be happy for them to vote for this guy. Anyway. So I want to wrap up what he's saying, and so you can hear the end of his statement. Very, very well worth it. Again, look in the video notes for the link to the full interview. Always good to hear things in context. Fine, let me hand over back to no, it's not to me. Over to Vivek.
This is a bipartisan concern. That's a real issue. Also, the shell companies created to do business with China and the Chinese government, again, paid millions of dollars. That is relevant information on the eve of a presidential election, when the fourth largest newspaper in circulation, the New York Post, founded by Alexander Hamilton, had its social media accounts locked for publishing a story, where you and I would have had our accounts locked for even sending it via direct message or email. So I do think we have to go back and reconcile ourselves with that, have to reckon with that, admit what went wrong if we're actually to move forward in the future. Sweeping that under the rug and relegating that to be the concern of rubes that live in the middle of the country and are election deniers, I think is the wrong approach for us to heal as a country. I think we have to reckon with the fact that we did that as a nation. The United States of America, we let that happen. Admit that. Now, my view is nations make mistakes. You can move forward if you understand those mistakes, but we have to be open about them.
So not to stay on this, but to summarize, in terms of a factual vote dumps or sandwiches and ballots under the table or vans backing in, Mike Lindell, cyber guys looking for bamboo fibers on the ballots. You're not talking about any of that. You're simply saying, had some people known about the allegations related to Hunter Biden at the time, enough people in some states might have changed their votes such that Trump would have gotten to 270. That's your position.
If that story had not been systematically top-down suppressed,
I gotcha.
I think there's good data to suggest it could have changed the result of the election. That's
okay,
correct.
Good. And the point, again, is not to debate it with you, but to get your position on the record. Good.
It's data-driven, so it's not. And David, before we rock and roll, not on this, but on just a synthesis of this conversation, I just feel, I'm on a mission to lead not a political party, but a nation. And I will share with you a commitment that I'm willing to make. And I hope that provides some inspiration to people who disagree with me on many issues like yourself. I
hope you're not about to offer me press secretary.
We have to get to know each other better before I make that offer, but maybe you're on the short list. I don't know. But here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we all need to do better of smoking out the best argument for the side that we actually disagree with, to contend with that, not with some caricature of it. And so I, for my part, believe that I'm doing that in this campaign. And if you spot an instance where you think I'm not, then get that on the table. But what frustrates me, and it does frustrate me, is that I see a lot of, and I know this world, man, like I came from it, right? I graduated from the top of my class at Harvard. I've been through Yale Law School. I'm working at a hedge fund in New York. Like, let's just get real here. Like, I know you. We haven't met before, but I know you in some sense of the word, okay? Like, you're not unfamiliar to me. And what I see amongst even my peers, right, is a form of laziness. I think I'm saying this out of respect and not an attack, in a constructive way. I saw a little bit of it in the start of this conversation, right? Where you're going to be able to smoke out a version of that which can be caricatured, but these are our fellow citizens. And their concerns come from a deep place where If you can do a better job of articulating and smoking out where that concern comes from, then we have an obligation to do it. And that's what gives me my motivation in this race, where people will say, somebody living 50 miles radius of where I am in central Ohio today and say, well, they say the First Amendment applies to tech companies. They're rubes because they don't know that that only applies to the government. Actually, to double click on that and say, you know what, there's something to that intuition. And it turns out if a private actor is doing what the government actually implicitly goaded them to do, then the First Amendment does apply. In every instance, to be able to say that when there's something of value there, don't just sweep that under the rug and reject it, smoke it out, and then let's have that real debate.
And
with respect
that's
to the
a
woke
fair
or trans
point.
case, I'll do the same. I am doing the same. That's what we got to do.
My name's Tzvi Lebetkin, the Rabbi from another planet. Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring that little bell. Ring the little bell so you're notified when new videos drop.